Howdy folks, I am your Princess ChaoticAyana, you are all beautiful, and today we are going to take a look at Mass Effect 3's story, and why the ending might not be the actual issue here. Now, if you haven't seen my other Mass Effect videos, there'll be a little link over here, go and check those out, and full spoiler warning for Mass Effect 3 obviously, because we're discussing the story. Let's jump in. I am sure this does not come as news to anyone who is watching this, but people hated Mass Effect 3's ending. And not just the usual very vocal minority, although as ever they took things far too far, they were threatening developers' families, and all of that other stuff that makes that particular subset of gamers generally terrible human beings. Anyway, so as I kind of went over in the intro, today I'm going to put forward to you a new idea. That while Mass Effect 3 does have some story issues, the ending isn't where they stem from. Let's take a look. Something you don't often hear referred to when discussing Mass Effect 3 is the fact that it was the testing ground for loot boxes, or its multiplayer was, which ironically isn't included in the Legendary Edition anyway. But it was also the time at which, frankly, EA started taking the piss when it came to DLC. There are some major story beats missing from the game if you only pay the $60 asking price up front. So you see this hard to fit for a hat chap here? That's Javik, the last survivor of the Protheans. The Forerunner race you have been hearing about in basically every single Mass Effect game. Hell, the plot of the first one centers around you finding what is essentially one of their time capsules. There's a good possibility you don't recognize him if you only played the base Mass Effect 3 game, and that's because he was paid DLC. Also, while we're at it, do you have any interest in where the Reapers came from, who created them, why, that sort of thing? Well, sorry, but if you didn't buy the Leviathan DLC, you're out of luck there too. Hell, this isn't 100% relevant, but if you're confused as to why Mass Effect 3 starts with Liara now being the Shadow Broker and Shepard being bound over for a military tribunal involving 300,000 deaths, sorry, guess you didn't play the Mass Effect 2 DLC. Okay, I'll stop now, but you get the idea, and you might even be wondering why I'm complaining about this at all, given the Legendary Edition contains all but one of the Mass Effect DLCs. Well, that has some problems of its own, and it affects the narrative pacing. Let me explain. Most of the DLC for Mass Effect 3, Javik being a notable exception, is designed to happen more or less before you reclaim Earth in the final big push. Fair enough. But there's nothing in the game that stops you doing it before that, and unless you're already familiar, it's not immediately obvious what was DLC and what isn't. Now from a story perspective, this isn't too terrible. It messes with the tone a little bit, but not much. What it does do is kill some reveals though. This, for example, is the Turian version of a husk. This is the Asari version of a husk. The first time you find these two in the main game, it's cool. There's a lot of fanfare attached to it being this big reveal and very intimidating, especially in the case of the Asari, even though they turn into just being standard enemies. The issue here is that they're probably standard enemies you're already very accustomed to if you accidentally played the DLC first, because you'll find them there and no one bats a narrative eyelid. Now I know this probably sounds like nitpicking, and to a certain extent it is, but my problem here is this was a super easy fix. All they had to do was either make it so it was abundantly clear you were about to start DLC and where that should take place in the story, or just not let you do it up until it doesn't spoil any reveals in the story. Just make it so you can't access, say, the Leviathan DLC up until you've done the Asari homeworld. It also speaks to some wider structural issues within the game, but we'll get to those in a second. Just quick tip actually while we're here. The Shore Leave DLC, you'll know you're starting it when Shepard gets their own apartment on the Citadel. Don't do that up until the very end. Two reasons. One, it's just narratively better if you put it there. And second, you're going to miss out on some quality banter from certain people if you don't have them in your party when you start that DLC. Anyway, moving on. So when all the complaints were happening about Mass Effect 3, the biggest one to come out was false advertising. Players were told their decisions were going to have proper agency and impact on the story, and a lot of people felt the final decision didn't live up to that promise. Now, as it happens, I disagree. I think the final decision that you make in the game is extremely impactful. I just think we don't get to see all the implications of it because it's the last decision you make in the last mainstream game. Maybe if we get a fourth one, we'll get to see exactly what that decision affected. But I also think it's kind of a misconception that that is the ending at all. Mass Effect 3 is the ending. And the moment you start to look at the game from that perspective, suddenly Choices Matter advertising makes a lot more sense. My playthrough this time, I lost Miranda because I'd forgotten to go and meet her at a certain point in the game. All of that, of course, would never have been an issue if she died in Mass Effect 2, which is absolutely a possibility. So you see, your choices do matter. If you're going to argue that they didn't because at the end of the game you chose to wipe out everyone in the galaxy and everyone died anyway, frankly, I find that argument pretty fatuous. That said, because Mass Effect 3 in its entirety is the game's ending, it does have a problem, and that's introducing new characters. Let's say you were watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and at the start of the final movie, Frodo and Sam meet a hobbit named Bob. Bob doesn't really do anything. After all, he can't have any agency on the story, really. It's been going for 2 movies since before he arrived. What he can do, though, is throw in the occasional quip and give the characters funny nicknames only he uses. Now, imagine Bob as a Latino man named James. I want to like James, I really do. He's a gorgeous slab of beef, if nothing else. But my choice when it comes to party members is between him, the last Prothean, the Quarian, who, you know, their race has a major thing going on in Mass Effect 3, Liara, who's been my girlfriend for the last couple of games, the ship's AI given a humanoid form, which is really cool and interesting, or, you know, this guy who just keeps calling me Lola for no particular reason. The same goes for any NPC the story brings in and tries to make it feel like a big deal, despite me never having heard of them before. Mind you, I can forgive most of those, on the basis that even playing through Mass Effect 1 through 3 back to back, when they brought back minor NPCs in the first game, I often struggle to remember them. I don't really think there's much of a solution to this either. Maybe what we needed was to either have an all-new ship's crew or nobody new. I'd have my boy Grunt back instead of James in a heartbeat. Mind you, speaking of new characters. Legitimate question, feel free to answer in the comment section. How many of you sat through the first 10-20 minutes of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith and wondered who the hell General Grievous was supposed to be and then never found out? This is a phenomenon that's only gotten more common since Mass Effect 3 came out, and it's a thing with movies and video games. I kinda hate this. It feels like gatekeeping to me. It's the sort of thing that leads asshats in video game stores, usually hearing a female clerk say she likes Mass Effect, going up and saying things like, bet you don't even know who Kai Leng is. Well, no, BioWare, I don't know who Kai Leng is, and you seem to have no interest in telling me, despite him taking up a decent chunk of plot real estate in Mass Effect 3. I already have a dislike for what was done to Cerberus in Mass Effect 3. The second game did such a good job of keeping these guys on a knife edge between kinda sympathetic and going far too far in the name of their cause. Sort of, they were fanatics but not quite complete zealots at this point, if you catch my drift. In the 6 months between Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, they have become total mustache-twirling comic book villains. They more or less exist here to be an enemy type and nothing more. Now sure, I get this is supposed to be because of indoctrination, but they could have had a little bit more subtlety about it. And then there's Kai Leng. So this guy shows up and instantly out-assassins Thane, who is admittedly terminally ill. And while we're at it, I think Thane's death would have been far better suited to just, being terminally ill, as opposed to being sped up by a cyborg ninja. In fact, while we're on that topic, I just don't think cyborg ninja feels particularly Mass Effect as a concept, nor in keeping with the Elusive Man's usual modus operandi. And it could be there's a totally reasonable explanation for both of those things. I wouldn't know, because Mass Effect 3 just kind of presumes I know this guy's a big deal and then moves on. What's kind of worse is that once he's introduced with no backstory, seemingly is, I don't know, is it fan service or service to the canon? One or the other, I'd say. The story has no idea what to do with it. Should she die in your playthrough, he is the one that kills Miranda, but this makes a lot less sense and is a lot less emotionally impactful than her father shooting her would have been, given their history and her storyline in Mass Effect 2. He more or less kills Thane, I went over that already, and Thane was one of my favourite characters in Mass Effect 2, so I admit I might have some bias there. But the only other thing he does is briefly inconvenience you on the Asari homeworld, you fight him, he gets away, you fight him a second time, and he dies. It's not even that Kai Leng is necessarily a bad character. He might be, but I wouldn't know. The game has no interest in telling me anything about him. He just feels like he's there to be an advert for the books. If we wanted to do this properly, why not have Zaid from Mass Effect 2 turn on you? I mean, it certainly felt like he was going to after that game. He'd make a lot more sense in this position. I'm not gonna lie, I love the Mass Effect trilogy story, and I love Mass Effect 3's story too. Whilst better does exist in books, I believe in video game terms, the way the Mass Effect trilogy goes from hope to fear to hope again right at the very end is probably one of the best stories we've ever had. I believe the characters are well written, and yeah, I actually like the ending. I think it's a great note for the series, even though I do understand why it wasn't to everyone's liking. The point I'm trying to make here is that for everything I've said in the video, I believe Mass Effect 3 is a truly poignant ending to the trilogy. It's just that they made some baffling decisions to get themselves there. Anyway folks, that is the end of my Mass Effect 3 videos. Now, I'll be honest, I just spent 110 hours playing through 3 RPGs over the space of about 2 weeks. I'm looking for something a lot more simple and innocent when it comes to the next game we're going to do. I'm actually kind of looking forward to this one as well. Join me next week when we will be reviewing DC Superhero Girls Teen Power on the Switch. I will see you all then. Until then, folks, I have been your Princess ChaoticAyana. You are all beautiful. Peace. I'm out.